Hello everyone, SlyJCool here, and today I'm back with another Minecraft video. In this one, I'm going to be showing you all how to build snowy stone ruins in Minecraft. These would fit in better in the snowy biome, where you would have much more snow condensing on the ruins, and you would have much less vegetation in the area. I'm going to be teaching you my method of creating them, so that you can learn how to do so yourself, and hopefully make as many as you want in the future. Let's get started. For this build, I use a palette of mainly stone bricks, cobblestone, and cracked stone bricks, with a little bit of stone mixed in as well. The cobblestone will be used for rubble that has fallen off the walls, the stone brick will be the main walls that are still there, the cracked stone brick will be parts of the wall that has cracked, and the stone will be parts of the walls that have eroded away after experiencing lots of wind and weather. We're also going to be using slabs and stairs of both cobblestone and stone bricks to add more detail. Now, let's get started with the first step, planning. As with most of my builds, I like to plan out things as much as I can before building, as I think it makes the final build a much better product. Now, for ruins, there's a few different things that go into the planning process. One of these is the areas where the actual ruined walls will go. In the outline that I've made here, you can see I've laid this out with blue concrete. I also have the areas where the full walls would have been when the house was there, however we won't actually be building these, and I've laid these out in light blue concrete. I've also used orange to mark out where the doors to the buildings would have been. Now, an important thing that I like to do when building these walls is make sure that the walls point towards each other so you can see where the original building would have been. This makes it look nicer and more immersive when you get to the final build. So as you can see here, I'll have this sort of facing around the corner and pointing into each other, so you can really see, once we get into this step, where the old buildings were. I also like to make sure that we have relatively interesting building designs, where you can see this one has 2 rooms, this one has 2 rooms, this one has 2 rooms, and this one also has 2 rooms, with this being the only real one that is 1 room wide. This is because, in the end, it will make it much more interesting to explore. I also like using orange concrete to mark out the doors, and an important thing to remember when you're marking out where the doors will be is where the road through the village or town that you are building would have been when the town was not ruined. In my ruins that I've built here, my idea is that it would go through here, snake through between these buildings, and then go out that way, possibly into some other direction, or to some other town. So you can see I've laid out the doors going to the outside, all facing the road. So we have this one facing towards the middle here, this one facing towards the middle, this one facing towards here, and perhaps a back alley where there would be storage, another one facing out here, and another one facing out here. This makes it easier to explore, so as whoever's exploring it is exploring, they can walk along the road and then get into the ruins if they want to. Once you've gotten all these laid out and all those factors considered, you can move on to the next step. In this step, we will lay out the areas where we had blue concrete already and build stone brick walls up from where they were. As you can see, that's what I've gone in and done here with the different rooms and all 5 of the houses that we had built up earlier. Now you can see I also have these areas where it's very clear where the doors once were, and this is one of the areas where it's important to mark out where the doors were, because then when you're exploring it as a finished product, it'll look much nicer because you can walk through here and sort of just see the remnants of the structure. You can also see how even in these smaller chunks, in this step, we still have them laid out, where realistically it would not still be this tall, but in this step we're going to leave it like that and not shorten it until the next one. It's also important for this part to make sure that we have the spots where we want the walls finalized, so perhaps if you weren't happy with some of them that you laid out back there, this is the time to fix it, because once this is done, we're really going to get into building and laying out and detailing the rest, and we won't really be able to change it after this without changing many other things as well. This is also the point where you can see the sight lines sort of coming into play that will help make it more interesting when you're exploring. For example, the thing that I mentioned earlier about including multiple rooms really comes into play now, where let's say you're walking along this path here. You have to turn all the way around here and go into here to see the other rooms, and this makes it much more interesting to explore as a finished product. Just looking from a single spot, you won't be able to see the majority of the ruins. Now, once you've gotten this laid out and you have a good plan in mind of what you want to continue with, it's time to move on to the next step. In this step, we will be breaking down the walls that we built previously and making them look closer to the final ruined product. Now, for this part, it's very important to keep a few things in mind. One of them is how tall each of the walls will be. The idea that I try to remember is that the areas closest to the edge of the wall will be eroded the most because they are exposed to more wind and weather and will be destroyed more over time. The areas that are more cornery and have more walls to the other sides of them won't be destroyed as much because they are more protected. This is why, if you have a smaller wall section, I recommend only having it 2 tall and you breaking off the areas that were 3 tall to only be this height, because in general, they would have been blown away more and hit more by wind and weather and whatever other forces worked on it to destroy it. This is also a good time to figure out the sort of curvature you want the walls to have. So you can see on these ones, I have it sort of starting at 1 and then going up to 2 and 3 very linearly. And we don't really have much of a curve, where if it was a curve, it would be more like this, where you have shorter and then steeper incline. And it's more of a sort of linear progression. If you have taller walls, you're probably going to want a more curved one. And it also just depends on the kind of destruction you're thinking would have happened. For me, I'm thinking this has mostly been an abandoned settlement that's been decayed away over time. However, if you're thinking it was blown up by something, for example, TNT or some other kind of explosive, you would probably have more round holes in the wall and you would have it more curved and probably more vertical sections torn out like this. Once you've gotten this figured out, however, it is time to move on to the next step. In this step, we're going to be adding stairs and slabs and really making this build finally come into detail. Now, what I like to do in this step is go in with slabs and stairs and pretty much just smooth out the entire walls that we've built so far. So what we're going to do here is just bring in some stairs and slabs along the walls like this and just overall make it look nicer and more smooth. This really helps give it the appearance of being weathered away or worn away over time, and also just makes it look better as it has more detail. I usually try to make it so that we don't have more than a half slab incline in each spot where it goes up. So for example, I don't want to have just a slab here because in this area it's going to be a block tall and that doesn't look as nice in my opinion. We also have areas where there's for example, a slab going up into here. I don't like this either because again, it gives us a full block of difference. So instead I'm going to have some stairs there. I try to do this in most of the areas, and I also make sure to use this time to mark out where the doors would have been and really solidify the examples of where we would have had them planned out. So you can see here we have this slab and the stair jutting over to make it very clear where the doorway once was. This adds some more interest when you're exploring the final product, and I think just makes it better in general. This is why I also like to keep the areas where the doors were cleared. So we have one sort of here, and then you can see another example here. And I try not to keep them like this because then you won't be able to get into these rooms and it will make it not as much fun to explore. You also may find that when trying to make the flat sections less boring, you end up adding slabs to the areas that were once 3 blocks tall. This is okay, and I think it's natural and necessary, especially when you have really blank areas like that was, where it's very flat and not very interesting looking. In this case, you're going to have blocks that are 3.5 blocks tall, which I think is okay, and still fits these ruins quite well. You can see I've done this in a few of my buildings, especially in the larger sections, for example here, here, over there, and over here. Now, once you've considered all these and gotten these finished up, you can move on to the 4th step. In the 4th step, we're going to add texturing to the walls and also rubble piles and rubble across the ground. This is going to really help add the detail that's going to make this look really good in the end. Now, to start, I usually go in and add stone and cracked stone brick to the walls. The stone would be the area where the weather and wind over time has stripped away at the bricks until you can't really tell that they're bricks anymore, and they more look like a flat stone face. The cracked area would be where the water and snow have gotten into it and sort of cracked it and eroded away over time. These is most common when there's a lot of water damage, which would of course happen in a snowy environment, where there's often melting of snow and water. Along with the texturing of the walls, I like to add cobblestone in a lot of areas across the ground. This, in my logic, is from the walls, where the walls would have fallen off and cracked over time, and lots of stone would have piled up around the ruins. I like to represent this with cobblestone as it looks like a relatively loose material, rather than stone brick, which sort of makes it look like there's more buildings where there shouldn't be. What I like to do in this part is grab cobblestone and sort of assemble it around the areas where the floor would have been mainly, and then some more on the outside of the building near the rim. You can see I've done this here, here, and in pretty much all of the buildings I've built up here. And we end up with this nice little patchy area and then some patchy areas extending from it. I also like to add some rubble piles using cobblestone blocks, cobblestone stairs, and cobblestone slabs. Using these, you can get really nice little piles of rubble where there was more rubble fallen off the stone and it would have piled up more. I like to mainly put these on the outside of the buildings so that they don't obscure exploring on the inside. Generally, I don't make these too large as I'm not making these houses too large, but of course it would scale with the size of the buildings that you are ruining. So for example, we have a larger part of the building right here, and we have more areas of the stone that is broken away. For the actual rubble piles, You don't really need to do much, and I just generally like to have a few blocks round and then a few blocks tall, and then you can add some slabs sort of sticking up where there would have been more rubble sort of piled up around it, and you end up with a pretty nice design sort of like that. Now, once you've gone in and added these piles and this texturing, it's time to move on to the final step. The final step is my favorite and what I believe to be the most important of the process. This is going to be when you're adding snow and then also a few other minor details to the houses near the end. The snow is going to help really make it more immersive and really make this nice and detailed like you're going to want it to be. So, what I like to do is go in and bring in snow about 4 layers tall. About like that. And then you're going to want to go in and bring in some more snow layers about 3 tall, jutting away from it. And then you go in with 2 tall, and then eventually just 1 tall, until you have this really nice sort of fading out of snow layers away from the buildings. So the closest ones, such as this one, are going to be 4 tall, and then it's going to fade out slowly. This helps it give the effect that wind is blowing snow up onto the sides of the ruins and getting stuck there, which is how it would happen naturally due to weather, if you think about how it would work in real life. This means that we will have smaller snow piles, for example, only 2 or 1 blocks tall, on the inside, where it would have been harder for the snow to get into and harder for the wind to blow the snow into. That's why we have, in areas like this, very few snow piles, and if we do have any, they're very short. You can see I've gone in and done this with most of the builds here. We still have some snow on the ground, but we don't really have any piles. Of course, the biggest snow piles are going to happen near the exterior of the ruins. So for example, on these 2 walls, where there wouldn't be anything in that direction to shield it from there. However, on the inside of the walls right here, where this is mostly in the center of the village and protected by walls from other buildings, you have smaller snow piles like this, which only gets to 3 blocks tall, and this one, which is only 2. Now, once you've gotten the snow in, there's a few other details that I suggest adding, but aren't completely necessary. One of these is adding some small wooden furniture, such as barrels, chests, and little tables. The barrels and chests can give it a nice RPG element, where if you want to include items or other things that were lost in the ruins, you can put them in here. I like to make these in the rooms that would be harder to get, where, thinking about the sightlines thing that we introduced a few steps ago, you'd have to actually go in and then look around some corners to find where they are. You can then loot them. I also like adding candles as a light source, or, in this case, a lack of a light source. You see, torches would eventually, if you think about it logically, extinguish over time, although in Minecraft they don't. Lanterns also would extinguish because they are fuel themed. However, candles would extinguish as well. But in Minecraft, we can actually do this, where you can just place some candles and not light them, and it looks like they've been blown out over time after neglect and not being lit. You can do this by adding some little candles just dotted around. I like using the basic variant without dye, but I think white, gray, and a few other colors also work quite well as well. And you can sort of add them in here, sort of dotted sporadically and unlit, and I think it gives a pretty nice vibe of seeming quite ruined and really just generally desolate. I would suggest actually adding a few less wooden pieces of furniture than I did here, where I have one in almost every building. However, it's sort of up to you and how much detail you want to include, as well as how much loot you want to include in the structures. You can also see I don't really have any left in here, as someone probably would have plundered them or destroyed them, or the weather would have destroyed them as well over time. So in these ones without as many rooms, we don't really have any. Now, if you've gone in and added all the details as I've suggested, you should have some pretty good ruins looking sort of like this done. These are some ruins I built in my own world just as a sort of example for this video, and also to show you what hopefully you can get some looking like. Hopefully your finished product will look something like this. If this video was helpful, please give it a like, and if you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe. See you next time.